I'm Stuart, welcome to Hardware Heaven, and today we're looking at Corsair's latest entry to the Obsidian series of cases, the 900D. Starting with the front of the 900D, we have a panel here which we can push to flick down. There are icons along here which tell us which ports are actually present, but we have the two audio inputs here, two front USB 3.0s, a reset button, and four standard USB ports. To close it, we just press in the top left hand corner there and it clicks back into place. For the front drive bays, we just reach to the side of them and with a little bit of pressure they pop off to reveal the drive bay. So looking further down the front panel, the metal front continues. We have the Corsair logo at the bottom, and like the drive bay above it, we just pull to release the front panel. It's a fairly sturdy piece of metal, and behind it we find a dust filtered intake. Press the top to pull that out, and then you can see the filter on here, which is easy to clean. Behind the filter we have three 12cm fans, and of course you could put a water cooling radiator in there if you wish. To put it all back together, we just place the filter back in, click it back into place, and then the front panel just pushes back in as well. So now we're around at the right hand side of the 900D, and to remove the side panel we just press in at the back here, and then we can pull away the side panel. It's another substantial piece of metal. There's no additional material on the inside, it's just that solid panel, and as you saw it came away with minimal force. That reveals some pre-tied wiring, and Corsair have applied some plastic clamps in here that we can pull out, and they allow us to just route the cables without requiring the traditional cable ties that would come with cases. There's rubber mounts on the wiring holes, and there's additional holes at the top without those. CPU backplate cutout, and we can see space for the hard drive bays down on the left hand side there, and one of them is populated out of the box and it's released by four screws, one on each corner, and just to the left of that we can see some fan wiring. Further down on the right hand side we have a little latch here which we press back, and that pops out the bottom bay. The first thing to note here is there's another dust filter, and it's magnetic, just lifts out for easy cleaning, and then just place it back where it needs to be. I have the space down here for additional fans, and also for your PSU. You can see the pre-tied cables. Hot swap bays down the bottom there for 3.5 or 2.5 inch drives, and again we can see fan wiring down the left hand side of the case for the front intake fans. And then of course to replace the side panel, just lift it up and it locks into place. We're now around at the back of the case. At the top corners we can see the push to release buttons for the side panels. There's a vent here which allows some airflow into the area where top mounted radiators will be. There is a 14cm fan installed here, grey blades just like the front of the case, and it's Corsair branded. 12cm holes are pre-drilled on the case, and it's worth noting that the screws used here have little rubber mounts on them to decrease vibrations in the case. There's the space for the intake-outtake part of the motherboard there. Further down on the back of the case we have 10 expansion slot covers. Space here for more air flow, and down the bottom, one of the more interesting aspects of the case, we have not only vertically mounted power supplies but also space for two or alternate locations depending on what you have installed down the bottom of the case. Looking at the left hand side of the 900D, we have a window as standard. We've removed that just now just because of some of the reflections on video. that has the same easy release button on the top corner as the right hand side, which we looked at in another part of this video. And upon removing the side panel there, we can see that there are 4 optical drive bays up here, tool free install, which is pretty much standard by today's case designs. Down the bottom here we have the drive bays, which just open up and then slide out. They have holes in them for 2.5 inch drives and also tool free install for 3.5 inch, and this slides back into place and locks in there. That is a removable drive cover, and we can see the rubber covers on the wiring holes. The motherboard standoffs are pre-applied at the factory, and a lot of space in there for extended ATX motherboards, standard ones, or if you wanted to be really crazy, I guess you could install a micro ATX system in there as well. And also worth noting is that a few little nice touches which were also present on the back of the case, just little edges down the side of the case here which stop any rough metal edges on the side of the case, and there are also little pads down the bottom corners to lessen some of the vibrations from the side panel and make it a little bit softer to add and remove. We can also fit one of the hard drive cages up here, and at the factory Corsair install them, 1 here and then 2 down the bottom, which we'll look at shortly, and then it's just a case of lifting them up and bolting them in there, but that allows for space in there for longer components or any tubing that we might want to put through to a radiator on the front of the case. So down at the bottom of the left hand side of the case, it's just again a push to release side panel. Like the right hand side, we have the removable magnetic dust filter, just easy to add and remove. You can see here the 2 extra sets of drive bays. What we can actually do is move this pre-installed one here down onto the rail down at the bottom there to have all 3 along the bottom of the case, or we can move this one up to here. We wouldn't want to remove that one normally because this is where the hot swap bays are that we could see on the other side of the case, and our power supplies of course sit down in the bottom left hand corner there where the pre-installed wiring is at the moment. So that brings us to the base of the 900D, where we have really very little going on. There are no intake filters, no dust vents, nothing like that. Just the 4 feet, 1 in each corner, and these have rubber bases on them, which gives us that little bit of stability on the floor and reduces any vibrations going from the case down into the floor. And up at the top of the 900D we have a great big exhaust filter area. Our radiators would obviously be beneath this, and this has a slightly patterned design. One of the few areas on the case which does have some form of pattern on it. The rest of it is quite solid black lines and big panels, but of course they've decided to go for a little bit of a stylish finish on the top there. So just to summarise the cooling potential of the 900D before we start the build, if we first look at the top of the system, we have space up here for a 480mm radiator. Also obviously you can put say 4 12cm fans up there, or a mix of 14cm fans. There's 110mm of clearance to the motherboard. On the left hand side of the case we have that 140mm fan as standard, and that can be taken out and put replaced with a 12 or 14cm radiator. There's actually space on the side of the hard drive caddies for 12cm fans, and then of course we could think about putting a radiator on there as well if we wanted to. That one can be moved up there, and so you could have your radiator very tight. At the front of the case, as we looked at earlier, we've got space for 240mm radiator with 55mm of clearance to the front panel. And then opening up the bottom of the case, we have space down there for another 480mm radiator and that's got 110mm clearance when there's a PSU installed, and there's also space down there for a 240mm radiator. So this is our 900D build, and the first step that we're taking here is to remove the 14cm fan from the back of the case. The reason for doing that is we went with a 14cm radiator on the top of the case. That's the Corsair H110. You can see it on the left of the screen at the moment. It comes with two 14cm fans as standard, and we're adding another two to the bottom of that. One of the things we also wanted to note at this point is that the side panels on the 900D are easy to remove. There's a button to remove the two main ones, and then the bottom sections also have just a little latch that flicks them open. But the top of the case is an absolute nightmare to get off. Really, if you're going to put buttons and quick release levers on a case, as Corsair have done here, they should probably do the same with the top, because the likelihood is that an enthusiast is going to use the top for a radiator section. So just a quick easy removable panel there would have been useful. The board that you can see going in there is an ASRock X79 Fatality Champion. It's a reasonably high-end X79 board, and we're applying the Corsair H110 cooler to that, and underneath it is an i7 3960X, which we're able to overclock to 5 GHz for this particular build. The Dominator Platinum memory gives us a little bit of lighting around the CPU area, and then for the add-in cards, no problems at all fitting in likes of a GTX 680, which we've done here. Plenty of room just to the edge of the motherboard there before you reach the drive bay area. Loads of cable routing holes there with the rubber covers. One thing to note at this stage though is that we removed the back fan and with the intention of putting in this 12cm radiator for the GPU cooler. There is quite a large edge to the side of the 900D, and what that means is that when you're trying to reach back and put in a radiator on the back there, or when you're trying to install add-in cards such as our PCI SSD or the Wi-Fi card that we've got in there as well, there's nowhere to kind of get a screwdriver in and tighten things up. You have to use the thumb screws. It would have been nice to have a cutaway there on the 900D side, just to let us use a screwdriver in around that area. PSU slotted in easily, as you saw there, with no problems with the sides or anything like that, and fans in the front. We're just replacing two of the pre-installed fans, so we can use the grey fans inside and keep the theme the same. The Corsair fans that we put on the front are two of their Quiet Series 120mm ones, and then for the PSU we've got the AX860, and we're just running the wiring behind the motherboard tray from that. It's a modular PSU, and the plastic clips on the back here you can see we're just using it initially to work out where some of the wiring's going, find out where the USB cables should go, where they're most tidy, and start tidying up some of the tubing for the all-in-one liquid coolers that we're using there. Moving round onto the SSD install, it's very simple. It's just 4 screws. We need to pop off one of the pins that's used for 3.5-inch drive installs. They're tool free for the mechanical drives, but for the SSDs it is those screws as we say, and we're using the hot swap bay for that, which can be found at the bottom front corner of the case. Next step was to install some of the USB 3 wiring that we just wanted to run through the case, and then slot in the optical drive to the front there. One of the things that we found with that is that it is easy to get in there. There's the tool-free clip to keep the drive in place, but the front panel, which is easy to remove, you can either pull it from the front or unclip it from the inside. There isn't a bezel which surrounds the front of the optical drive, so it sits a little bit further back than the metallic front to the case, and it doesn't look as good as it could. Having a proper surround for optical drives would have been something that Corsair should have installed there. The final component of note really for our build was to add in a second GTX 680 overclock card. This one here was one that we installed with a liquid cooler ourselves. The other one came pre-installed. Again, we're using Corsair's front fan as the second fan on the 12cm radiator, and we're adding in just the front bracket there where we can draw air in from the front of the case through the drive bay and then through two 12cm fans and straight onto our PCIe location, keeping both cards as cool as possible because they do also have low noise fans on them. So turning around to the back of the case, we tried to stick to using Corsair's plastic wiring clamps as much as possible. They do a reasonably good job of keeping things together in the centre channel, but we did need a few cable ties and over towards the right hand side, and the PSU area is a bit messy too, although that's mostly hidden behind the bottom panels when the case is closed. It might have been a good idea for some sort of covered channel in there that Corsair could have allowed us to route cable wiring behind, just along the bottom there towards where the hotspot bays are. It would have also been good to see some rubber covers on all the wiring holes rather than just some of them, just as a nice extra touch to add to the quality of the case. A few extra notes before we finish up. There's plenty of room in the main chamber for extended ATX boards, as we saw. There's also room for a drive bay mounted radiator with two 12cm fans just alongside the PCIe area that you'll find on most motherboards. Some longer fan wiring might have been a nice touch on the Corsair fans, but overall it's an issue-free build. And that's especially good considering it's a high-end i7-3960X, the 14cm compatible radiator, and two liquid-cooled GTX 680 overclock cards in SLI. So that's Corsair's 900D case. It's extremely well built. It has huge flexibility in terms of the components that can be put inside, and due to the number of fans you can install and the wide variety of radiators and locations for those radiators, it has excellent performance and therefore gets our performance award. It does have a few quirks though that stop it from being the perfect case, but overall highly recommended. Remember to check out our website, the link's below. Also subscribe, and if you visit the website, there is a full text review of the case along with a 24 megapixel image gallery.